What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an early preview of Rue Valley. This game is a narrative adventure, I would say pretty obviously inspired by things like Disco Elysium, being developed by Emotion Spark Studio and published by Owlcat Games. And if you watch the channel a lot, you might remember me talking about this briefly in a video talking about how Owlcat had become a publisher fairly recently, and this is one of those games they'll be publishing. With that in mind, they gave me access to a pre-alpha build. The build itself describes it as a little bit early of a collaboration with Humble Bundle, where people will be able to take a look at this for themselves via some deal there. I don't have the exact specifics, but I know it's supposed to be running from now, when this video goes up, through about September 30th. If you wanted an opportunity to play a little bit of this for yourself, assuming this video doesn't cover enough of it for you. But with that in mind, as I mentioned, this is a narrative adventure. So while there are certainly gameplay elements, if you've ever played something like Disco Elysium or any other narrative game, you'll likely get the gist of it, but basically the story is the game here, and thus how interesting and engaging that story is and how well it is told is pretty much make or break for the title. Now, in the case of Rue Valley, I would say it does a pretty good job of being interesting right out of the gate. So specifically, by casting us in the role of Eugene Harrow, a man struggling with more than a few problems, but not least of which is the game's main premise. Our character is trapped in a time loop of sorts, one that spans, I believe, 47 minutes, that he keeps replaying over and over again. And while that's interesting enough in and of itself, because subsequent runs through that time loop allow you to very quickly explore different avenues and whatnot, it is made a little bit more complicated by the overall situation our character finds himself in. For instance, the time loop starts right at the end of a therapy session, that through the course of the first day, basically, you'll discover that your character has been court-ordered into therapy for some reason. This therapy is taking place in a remote location, such as this hotel area that we're in, and this therapy has been court-ordered due to some condition that has not yet been named, and you're not really sure what's going on, or barely even who you yourself are. But in running through the time loop several times over, and messing around with the game's character personality system on top of intentions and goals, you can subtly change both the mental hurdles of your character themselves, but also learn more and be able to do more each run through the game. Now, this starts in what acts as a character creation here, but do keep in mind this is all pretty early placeholder type stuff, where basically we pick between a few different personality points and traits to give our character some basic traits to start the game with, such as being kind or unkind, dramatic, awkward, secretive, or any other of the ones you can see here. Now, this is, I would say, where the time loop part of it comes into its most useful state, because simply by talking and picking dialogue options, these stats, if you want to put it that way, will change, which can see you going from one personality to the next pretty quickly based on how you're replying to people. And with the relatively short nature of the time loop, I think that makes a fair bit of sense. But based on which character traits you have at any given moment, or simply ways you've interacted with the environment, for instance, you'll have a bunch of character tags that can then be used or potentially block you from certain conversation options. Now, this is in addition to story-related stuff. For instance, our character starts this little preview with a lack of motivation, but through the story objectives, you slowly get that motivation back, which unlocks all of these different conversation options that were previously blocked on your first run through, which is important because you're going to need that motivation to pick up willpower to start discovering some new intentions and slowly changing the way your character thinks. Basically, at the end of the first day, there's some odd occurrences just outside of the motel area, with a car crashing into a transformer, only for the world to seemingly end in a fiery display right afterwards. And then you wake up, the therapy session is ending yet again, and this next day, through different conversation options, you can slowly discover that you are in a time loop when you get to the intentions portion of the game. When your character starts remembering these things that had previously happened, you can start putting two and two together and activating all of those memories in this screen to not only find your initial motivation, but also in order to start tracking down these intentions and chasing each one of them on the subsequent time loops to learn more and more about what's going on here, what is supposedly wrong with your character, why these strange events keep occurring, etc., etc. Now, one thing that I did think was odd in particular, though, is that your character gets a phone call towards the end where it's heavily implied that for whatever reason your character should not be here, which gives a certain, I would say, unsettling undertone to everything else going on, as if the world-ending time loop wasn't enough. But taking a more zoomed-out approach to that reveal, that conversation almost seems, I would say, a little more like foreshadowing. For instance, that phone call seems to imply that maybe it's actually aware of the time loop itself in some situation, but all of that is a mystery for another time. Because basically what I want to get across with this video here is that I think Rue Valley is a promising narrative game, and if you've hung around the channel for a long time, you might very well know that I enjoy reviewing those every once in a while, and I like what I've seen of this one so far, basically with its ability to quickly run through iterations and options and unlock and explore new avenues of this via this relatively quick iterative time loop system, but also just the story itself seems pretty interesting. So I'll certainly be keeping an eye on this one as it moves towards its release date. We don't know when that is just yet, no word on it, but rest assured when it gets a release date and when it actually releases, I'll certainly be reviewing it. So if you're looking forward to more information on this one, certainly subscribe and stick around. Let me know all about how you feel about this one down in the comment section below, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.